To the cloud. Okay. Well, good morning, both of you. And we are excited to talk about virtual IEP meetings today. Definitely interested to hear how your school's been doing it. And so we want to just share some general tips and tricks that we've learned throughout the last couple of weeks from both teachers and meetings that we've experienced in order to better support you as you hold your IEP meetings. So here at the DLC, our mission is just to connect teachers to the best resources available so that they can effectively support their diverse learners. We want to make sure that they have opportunities and spaces to collaborate, find resources, and find tools that they can use the next day in their classrooms. So what we're going to focus on today is just setting up our IEP meetings for success, as well as what are some best practices for effective communication during those meetings, since it looks so much different now that we're doing many of them virtually compared to in person. And then a couple of tips and tools from teachers who've done it and who have had some success with this virtual meeting platform. So as we all know, school has changed drastically since when we were in the building, and our IEP meetings used to be something that was pretty routine and familiar and looked a lot like this. Team members all gathered around a table, figuring out what support students needed in order to be most successful. However, given the changes that we've seen, that format has really disappeared, and so we've had to come up with new ways in order to meet the needs of students while all being separated from one another. A lot of times the challenge is that it feels like everybody is talking at different points, whether through messaging, through email, through text, through phone calls. And so it's hard to all get together and kind of align those ideas and those plans of actions. So what we're going to do is go over 4 general steps that we've come up with in order to help you have effective virtual IEP meetings, and talk about specific details or steps you can take within each of those in order to make sure that your meeting is as smooth as possible. So first, we're just going to identify the logistics to help us draft a plan of information, draft an IEP, and draft some ideas that can be shared with the family. Then we'll talk about how to actually implement the meeting. How do we go about getting everybody together, sharing all this information, and coming up with feedback or revisions to make? And then finally, we'll reflect on what happened in the meeting, figure out our next steps, and any plans of actions that need to occur in order to make the student more successful in remote learning. So when we talk about the first step of identifying, this is a lot of the logistical preparation. So we've got to first make sure what our school district policy is about holding IEP meetings during remote learning. Locally here in Nashville, the school district has decided to hold virtual IEP meetings. So a lot of schools are doing that, especially for students that have annuals during this time in the spring. However, it's not required for all students right now. So it's really with your school team important to identify who needs an IEP right now and whose can be done in the fall or upon re-entry to school. We also want to make sure that all the team members are included. This is especially going to be important with everybody being remote and separate from one another, that we don't forget anybody on the IEP team. And then we want to decide how we're going to get in contact with a parent. Normally, we might send home an invitation letter in the student's backpack or in their folder or even over email. We want to make sure that we're connecting with the parents in person so they know when the meeting is, potentially what times are available and best fit with their schedule, as well as what options they have, especially if they might not feel comfortable doing a virtual IEP meeting. And then we finally want to make sure that we familiarize ourselves with the technology first so that we're most prepared in order to host the meeting effectively. There's a lot of different platforms being used right now. Locally, they're using Microsoft Teams or GoToMeeting at a lot of our schools that we're working with, but Zoom, Google Hangouts, JoinMe, and Skype are also other great options. Some of the tips that we've heard from teachers that have started to organize have been making sure that everybody's schedules align. Again, working from home is very different and new for everybody. So a lot of people are juggling homeschooling their own children, juggling childcare with spouse work times as well. And so we want to make sure that the times that we have available are ones that not only work for the students' families, but also for our team members too. A great tool to use for this is Doodle. It's an easy way to propose a bunch of different options and visually see who's available at what time. This can also be included for the parent, or you could come up with these options ahead of time just with your team and then propose 2 or 3 options to the parent as well. We've also created a resource at the DLC that you can find on our website about how to prioritize different IEPs that are coming up. So that can be useful, again, in figuring out who does need an IEP, annual or addendum right now, and then which ones can be saved later for the fall. All right. Now, we want to make sure that when we're planning, we're also thinking about all the possible supports that students need. So this goes for academics, especially once you know what your district's policy is about providing academics right now during school closures. We also want to think about support beyond academics. A lot of our families are struggling with behavior or with communication or other emotional social needs. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking about the ways in which we can support families beyond just those academic services that we might have just had before in the IEP. We want to make sure that we think about all these things when drafting the IEP, and we want to make sure that we share that draft with the families as well. It's also really helpful, even though we're all meeting virtually, to have an agenda created and just list out what topics you're going to cover, the order in which you're going to go, even who the meeting leader is going to be, just so everybody's clear and on the same page about how the meeting will proceed. Once you've shared these, another great tip that we've heard about is to create a model for how to access the technology. A lot of our parents may not be familiar with the technology that we really know well at school. And so we want to make sure that we can provide some sort of model or directions or steps for parents so that they're not overwhelmed or confused trying to even get into the meeting. One other tip that we've heard about is for older students or students going through transition meetings would be to have them write a letter about themselves so they can share information or advocate for the skills that they need or the tools that help them be successful in the classroom, so that we can make sure that we're still including their voice in the meeting if they're not able to be present. So some tips that we've heard, we have worked on here at the DLC some sample service schedules. So how to translate those services that may have been in the IEP before into virtual services now. We're not going to see a direct translation of services because it's almost impossible to replicate that as well within the school with being out of school buildings. So how can we meet the needs of our students in a different format or using a different platform? We also want to think about the services that we can provide, again, beyond academics. So how do we set up our students for success with their families, especially behaviorally? All these slides will be going out and they'll be linked within it as well. So if you hover over these resources, you'll see we've linked some resources to behavior support documents or easy family tip sheets that can be really helpful to share with families in the IEP team during the meeting as well. We also have linked here this tip that we got from a teacher about a platform called Loom, which is a way to video record your screen while also having your face and voice float right next to it. So this is a great way, especially if you have parents that are unfamiliar with the technology platform you're using, to record exactly how they might open up their email, click on the link, log into the meeting. If you're able to even practice this with another teacher on your team or with somebody outside your team, that would be great too, to make sure that all the technology works. Oops. Well, that's what happens when you click on the different links. It'll pop up on your next page. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so now that it's time to actually host your IEP meeting and implement it, there's definitely a couple of things that you want to do to set up the meeting for success right from the get-go. One of those is to start out with introductions. Make sure everybody knows who's on the call or who's on the video conference so that everybody's on the same page. We also want to set up some norms for technology. It can be really hard to balance multiple speakers at once or sound in the background or different things going on. So just make sure you're clear about how you want the meeting to proceed with those expectations. Also think about the expected amount of time. Typically in schools, our IEP meetings might last 30 minutes to an hour, maybe more, maybe less. However, we really want to be cognizant of families' times right now, especially since so many parents are juggling work or childcare, that we're not just having an hour-long meeting just to have an hour-long meeting. How can we be really efficient while still covering all of the material that needs to be shared? And then finally, I would recommend having a designated meeting leader who's the one in charge of moving the meeting along and following the agenda to make sure that you're staying on track. Make sure that everybody has access to the documents that you sent. This may mean that you have to mail out documents, hard copies ahead of time if you're able to make sure that the parent, especially if they don't have an additional computer or tablet or phone, has the draft to look at while they're on the call or on the video conference. It can be hard if parents only have one device for them to look at the document and be talking with the team at the same time. Make sure you stick to the agenda that you've planned out. You can be flexible and be really creative as you're thinking about supports for students, but definitely help yourself stay on track by having that agenda so you're making sure that you're not missing any important questions to ask. And speaking of questions, we want to make sure that our questions are really specific. Beyond what do you need, we want to make sure that we're asking, how are children responding to this? What changes have you seen in their emotional or their behavioral states at home? How can we help? A lot of times parents might not be sure what to ask for, or they might not know what you can help with. So they may be struggling, say, with a morning routine and getting ready. While that doesn't seem academic, there's ways that we as special education teachers can still support that routine with a task analysis or with a visual schedule. So making sure that we're asking really specific questions to find out how students are doing so that we can support parents with all aspects of home learning. As you go through the meeting, make sure that you're gathering feedback and you're not just telling the parent this is how it will be. We want to make sure that we're including their thoughts, their concerns, especially since learning right now looks so different at home. And then if possible, make revisions in the moment so that the team can sign. There's a lot of different things going on with signatures right now, depending on your school or your district. Some districts or schools are waiting until we go back to reentry to sign all the paperwork in person. Some are using electronic versions to sign. One platform that you can use is this one right here called DocuSign. They do have a lot of free trials going on right now, and a lot of schools are taking advantage of that in order to make sure that IEP documents are signed by all team members in attendance. We've also created a sample agenda that you can use with questions to consider. You don't necessarily have to use all of these questions, but they're just good starting points to think about things that might not have been considered in a typical IEP meeting in the school building. If we're able to implement all of these things, then we're very likely to have a successful meeting where everybody's voices are heard and the process is really smooth. Oops, all right. And let's get back over here. And then one other thing that we wanted to mention is that a lot of times right now, schools are maybe not hosting IEP meetings, or they're not putting this information directly into the IEP about what virtual support will look like. We've created an additional addendum template that you could use if the district's decision is to not put this information directly in an IEP. So for example, some districts are having their annual IEP meetings right now, and they're drafting services as what they would look like if we were in the school building so that the student has continuity for next year. However, you might want somewhere to document, or the parents might want somewhere to document what kind of supports are going to be provided virtually right now. So this could be a great template that you can use. Again, it's linked, so all you have to do is hover and click on this document and the slides once you get them, and it'll bring you right to the website where you can download an editable version of it too. And the last step that we want to do after the meeting has completed is to reflect. We want to make sure that we've covered everything that needs to be covered and that the student is fully supported moving forward. We want to make sure that we've documented any of notes or meeting decisions in the prior written notice, and then that's sent out to the team as well as kept in the file. We also want to make sure that we're providing the family with any resources that they need in order to implement this IEP at home. So if we are going to be providing virtual check-ins or services of some type, we want to make sure that they have access to technology, the actual computers or the tablets, as well as internet or other resources that they might need in order to do this. And then finally, we want to make sure that we have a clear schedule of who's going to check in, what they're going to check in about, and how often that's going to happen, so that it's clear on both ends for teachers and families to know what the next steps look like. We've also heard about schools deciding and communicating to families that they will hold addendum meetings in the fall, especially if the data right now is not truly reflective of where the students are or what they need. So if that's going to be the case, make sure you communicate that to families and team members as well. There's just some mindsets to consider and some different tips that we've heard from teachers as they've had their meetings. We're having to be really flexible, although special ed teachers are designed to be flexible. We want to make sure that we're being consistent with our communication and that we're coming at one centralized location for our communication. It can be really confusing if parents are receiving emails from the related service providers and from the special ed case manager and from the general education teacher. So figure out, while you're being collaborative, how you can also streamline your communications to be really clear during this time. We've also linked another resource that we've created on our website, which is an Excel tracker for individual services, group services, remote learning options that you can also hover and click to download. This could be a great way if you are providing services to document every time you've provided a service so that you can check later on to see how many minutes were provided to the student during school closure. Now, some questions that teachers have shared with us that have come up that they haven't really been sure how to answer is, what about summer? And what about if my student is moving, changing schools, or changing teams? In terms of summer, it's really still a big unknown right now. So we're gonna have to rely heavily on local and state guidance to figure out what the next steps look like. Locally here in Nashville, they haven't made a clear decision yet about what extended school year might look like or compensatory services might look like. So in that case, just communicate to the parents that as soon as you have information, you'll be able to update them. We also want to be clear about what teachers' roles will look like. This remote learning has blurred the lines a little bit of when does it start, when does it stop, when will it end? So make sure that you're clear about this is how long this will go for, and when during the summertime, what are some other options if teachers are not available at that time that families can engage in order to continue learning. In terms of changing teams, we've had a couple people express concerns about my students moving to middle school or high school. We weren't able to do their transition meeting. Nobody's going to know them there. One of the things that you can do is, as a team, draft an IEP right now and download it from the platform, like from Easy IEP, and either save that or put that in the file so that teachers and teams next year have information to build off of. Another thing to do would be to ask the students themselves or the teachers to write a narrative letter that includes really important information about the student, their likes, their interests, things that motivate them, or tools that they need that might not always be communicated as clearly in the IEP, and include these in the file as well so that all that information is shared with the next team. The other thing that you could do is try to connect with the next team if you are in the same district. A lot of times email addresses might be available through different coaches or administrators, so you may be able to connect that way. If not, if you do have work samples at home or online that you can use, try to create a student portfolio with some of their data from pre-closure as well as during closure if you have it. That will help give a picture to what the student is doing at the moment for the next school team. All of this information is actually consolidated in one nice, neat little document on our website, Conducting Virtual IEP Meetings. So you can go ahead and grab that for free and download that and share that with your school teams as well. All of the resources that we suggested today or showed you today are also on our COVID-19 hub at our website, which is listed here. And you can find most of them under the section called Convene the Team. So again, you can go on there and find a lot of editable versions of our documents as well as printable ones as well. So I know we went through a lot of information really quickly, but let's hear from you if you have any questions that either line up with the ones that we talked about or are completely different about virtual IEP meetings. Brooke, were there any in the chat? No, okay. Has anybody experienced an IEP meeting that was successful and went great, or that they had concerns about after the fact?
I'm about to have one this morning, so it was actually really good timing. But yeah, I liked how you guys addressed about having the student advocate for themselves. My student is in 3rd grade, but I'm thinking of texting the mom and saying, like, you know, if he can join just for the beginning, maybe to share out like a strength or and then like something maybe he struggles with. That wasn't something we would do, like the students wouldn't join at when we did it in person, but I wonder if it would be good to have them join just for a minute or two virtually.
Yeah, I love the idea of having the student share a strength, because I feel like that's really a way to build confidence in our students and also have them advocate at the same time. So I think that'd be a great idea. And even just to check in and let their teachers know how they're doing, or have one fun thing to share from their time at home. Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea, no matter the age. Awesome, thanks, Jackie. All right, so we are coming up on our time here. So we really appreciate you spending the morning with us. We will have the slides and recordings available for you to use and download later from our website. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Mary M. at Diverse Learners Co-op, or Brooke, which is just Brooke at diverselearnerscoop.com. We'll be having our next date to be determined, but our next coffee chat will be about supporting the emotional needs of students while they're at home. So we hope you can join us again then. Thanks so much.